Oh geez, here we go again. Harmon Smith is still complaining about Palworld, and this time it's in a video titled Palworld Updates, all caps by the way, and no one cares. I guess it's up to me to tell Harmon that he cares, since he constantly brings Palworld up in his videos. Hey, you know how Harmon is constantly saying how games like Palworld, Baldur's Gate 3, and Elden Ring have all been forgotten? If that's true, then why does Harmon constantly bring them up? Since he's constantly bringing them up, then that means you're talking about them, reminding everyone that these games exist, and so, even if everyone else had forgotten about them, then you bringing them up just proves that they haven't been forgotten, Harmon. Intelligence, logic, and common sense, the three types of kryptonite to all fanboys, no matter the system that they game on. Harmon really is gonna die on that hill he's standing on, isn't he? He's going to die on that hill, licking Nintendo's boots until they are completely barefoot, and he will still be licking their boots long after there are no boots left to lick. I mean, I admire his dedication to the cause. It's admirable in its own screwed up little way, but still, man, there are times when you have to tell Nintendo that they are plainly, clearly, blatantly in the wrong. Like, you know, with taking down fan projects and fan mods that don't harm Nintendo's bottom line in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I get that Nintendo has to protect their IP. They have final say on it when it comes to their IP. But come on, man! I've actually seen comments on other people's videos on Harmon Smith from other self-proclaimed Nintendo fanboys, or Nintendrones, as I call them, and if you prefer, and even they say they want nothing to do with this man baby. What does that tell you? Anyways, I've rambled on for quite a bit in this intro. Maybe I should have left in some dead air as well to show the Harmon Smith fanboys what he really sounds like. Rambling again, sorry. You may begin your blatant nonsense now, Harmon.
Pre-order my book, American Evil, in the description below.
Okay, we're not even 5 seconds into the video, and already Harmon is promoting his god-awful books, which I have read an excerpt from, and let me tell you, after I was through, I was crying. Not because they were good, God no, but because of how god-awful and cringy they are. If you want to read Harmon's books, then go watch the Cow Wrangler's stream review of it, or a crab named Heller read them on stream. Both of them had to find ways of getting through Harmon's god-awful literature, if you want to call it that. I think the Cow Wrangler had to smoke something? I won't say what, as I haven't watched the stream yet. And a crab named Heller had to drink alcohol all throughout, because that's just how terrible Harmon's writing ability is. Trust me, folks, Harmon's books are terrible. I don't know why he's trying to promote them. Well, actually, I do, but I'm just here to warn you, is to not read Harmon's books. That's the only reason I left this bit in, because they aren't nearly as terrible as what I'm making his literature out to be. No, they are far worse than what I'm making them out to be. Anyways, Harmon, I'm sorry for cutting you off there. You may resume your blatant nonsense now.
Palworld has announced that they are releasing 30 new Pokemon. Pals in the new DLC update.
Oh, here we go. Starting in with the whole Palworld plagiarized Pokémon BS. You know, I've asked it before, and I'll ask it again. If Pocket Pair plagiarized Pokémon, then why hasn't Nintendo, Game Freak, or the Pokémon Company gone after them yet? Remember, all of these companies are based in Japan, and Japan has far stricter IP laws than any other country out there. So, even if Nintendo does take Pocket Pair to court over what Harmon claims is plagiarism, guess what? It wouldn't be an international case, it would be a domestic one. That is to say, the lawsuit would be taking place in a Japanese courtroom. Not a US courtroom, not a European courtroom, but a Japanese courtroom. Has Harmon forgotten that Nintendo and all these other companies are based in Japan? It honestly wouldn't surprise me at this point. Also, Pocket Pair never announced how many pals would be getting introduced in the new update, which isn't DLC, by the way, it's an update to the game overall, and Palworld hasn't even been released from early access yet. Why would they make DLC for a game that's still in early access? This is all content added to the main game, baby! They just said, many more pals are coming to Palworld along with new islands. Harman, you really should learn to keep your mouth shut, as all you're doing at this point is giving Palworld free publicity. You're also proving Pokémon fans to be a bunch of morons. You claim that Palworld plagiarizes Pokémon, yet you give absolutely zero evidence to back that claim up. So we're just gonna dismiss it. And before anyone gets on here and says it, yes, I'm fully well aware that some of Palworld's pals look similar to Pokémon characters, but even still, considering that Nintendo is extremely overprotective of their Pokémon IP, they're overprotective of all of their IPs, but especially Pokémon, you would think that this would have gone to court by now, but it hasn't. And I know some dipstick is going to get on here and point to the examples of Yuzu and Gary's mod as how long it took for Nintendo to go after them. However, two things you must know, one for each of those instances. One, Nintendo didn't actually win the Yuzu lawsuit. Tropic Haze settled out of court. Yes, that means they have to do whatever it was that Nintendo wants them to do, unfortunately. But Nintendo didn't actually accomplish anything either, now did they? Emulation is still legal. There are several more Nintendo Switch emulators, and that's before we get into the other Nintendo console emulators out there. And there are still numerous ROM websites, and even if Nintendo goes after every single one of them, guess what? Nintendo will never win in their little crusade against piracy. Instead, they should be porting their games over to PC if they have that big of a problem with piracy, as this would solve 90% of their so-called problem, air quotes. But since they don't, I at least think it's safe to say Nintendo doesn't really care as much as they like to claim that they do. As for Gary's mod, that was a copyright troll according to the rumors, but the problem with that is that it just makes Nintendo look worse than they already do, as they're not doing anything to stop it. And right now, Nintendo already looks really bad from the stuff they've been pulling in recent years. A few examples from recent memory, in addition to the ones listed above. Nintendo pretty much enslaved a man for the rest of his life by hacking his Nintendo Switch. They hired a literal stalker to stalk someone who hacked their 3DS. They somehow managed to win a lawsuit over in Germany where they refused to issue refunds for digitally purchased games. Greed incarnate right there. Replaced the Virtual Console, which was awesome, with a craptastic online emulation service, which makes their hatred of emulation even that much more stupid and ironic, continuing to sell Joy-Cons that can, and probably will eventually, get Joy-Con drift, which Nintendo still hasn't fixed permanently, by the way. The Nintendo Content Creator Program, where anyone who dared to use Nintendo game footage had to give Nintendo a cut of the revenue, only allowing Super Mario 3D All-Stars and Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon, and the Blade of Light to be sold for a very limited time, and then stop selling them to try and use FOMO to get them to sell more copies, and the list quite literally goes on. Oh, and Nintendo hates their fans, too. Just to rub a little extra salt into your wounds, Harmon.
They're having an entire new island to explore, and they're going to have a bunch more content, and nobody cares.
Further proof that something is seriously wrong with Harmon's mental health. Harmon, if nobody cares, and I want you to answer me honestly here, why are you still bringing it up? What is the possible reason for you to continue to bitch and moan and cry and complain and cope and seethe and mold and all that stuff over Palworld? If nobody cares, then nobody would be talking about it. Yet here you sit, bitching up a storm over a game that you claim no one cares about. It's almost as if you care because you want to play Palworld, yet you can't because it isn't on the Nintendo Switch. meaning you have a sour grapes mentality. For those of you who don't know what the sour grapes mentality is, it means, at least in this case in regards to Harman, that Harman wants to play Palworld so badly, but because it isn't on a Nintendo console, he can't. So he downplays it, complains about it nonstop, and just in general whines about it, says it isn't good to try, and try and convince himself that it isn't worth playing because it sucks. To any and all Nintendo fans watching this video this far in, I have to know, does Harmon Smith not make it just plain embarrassing to be a fan of Nintendo, like in general? I hate Nintendo with a burning passion, so I wouldn't know, but I absolutely have to know at this point.
There is no recovery for Palworld at this stage, right? We are getting the first major update, I think, since launch, right? We're getting like the first major update, like major changes to the game, major updates, and yet nobody is really talking about Palworld at all, unless it's to make fun of them for ripping off Alolan Ninetales with their like Ice Fox thing.
You see what I mean by Harman having something seriously wrong with his mental health? That, and he just absolutely refuses to do research as well. Dude, Foxicle, that's the pal that Harman is referring to in this clip, looks nothing like Alolan Ninetales. It looks like the bastard love child between Alolan Ninetales and Glaceon, if anything. Also, if it's plagiarized from those two Pokémon, like you claim, then why hasn't Nintendo done anything about it yet? Sorry to repeat myself, folks, but Harman repeats himself, as we've been through before. He says stuff that he has no knowledge of, put no effort into researching, then he goes and makes an entire video based on the one little thing he saw, and he also doesn't script out his videos either, which makes him just look like that much more of an idiot. Having said all of that, I genuinely hope that Harman never changes because he makes covering his nonsense that much easier. Unfortunately for me, though, people are getting bored because you can really only tell somebody that they're wrong in so many ways before you eventually start repeating yourself, and we have long since passed that point in regards to Harman Smith. I said this in the last video, but it's like Harman has a script in his head that he reads from. Also, in one of these videos, we're going to start keeping account of how many times he says one of his many catchphrases. These are in no particular order, and I don't remember all of them. Sorry, I don't really pay attention to his nonsense that much. I drift in and out. But anyways, his catchphrases are, the reality is, nobody wants to admit/acknowledge it, right? And people are propping up X to downplay Nintendo. You know, stuff like that.
Right. It's like a weird mashup between like Alolan Ninetales and Glaceon. Like, again, it's pretty blatant. It's obvious. You know, everyone's pointing this out, but, you know, Pocket Pair is still doing this. They're still trying to make Palworld a thing, right? Trying to pretend as if they can viably compete with Pokemon while blatantly ripping them off. It's
once again, Harman demonstrates that he can't pronounce anything correctly. You heard him pronounce Glaceon's name as Glaceon, right? It's similar to how he pronounces Arceus as Arceus, how he pronounces Tensei as Tensai, how he pronounces Mana as Mana. Like, how are you for real, man? How are you a Nintendo fan, yet you can't even pronounce a Pokemon's name right? And it's almost as if Harman did it intentionally to rub salt into my wounds, as Glaceon is one of my favorite Pokemon of all time, too. Wait a minute. I know how to get back at Harman. I'll mispronounce Edelgard's name. Edelgard is Harman's waifu, by the way. He has posters of her in the background. And I'll pronounce her name as Edelgard. Let's see how funny you find mispronunciation of things now, Harman. Also, Palworld didn't rip off of Pokemon, Harman, so suck my cock.
It's disgusting, right? But I do take solace in the fact that the game has completely fallen off and has no real hope of recovery, right? They can do whatever they want with the game. They can like update it, however, they can like make changes to it. The reality is the hype period is over.
You mean just like how Tears of the Kingdom's hype period is over? You mean like how Super Mario Bros. Wonder's hype period is over? You mean like how Animal Crossing New Horizons hype period is over? Harmon, Palworld hasn't fallen off and it will recover one day. You're just salty that it isn't made by Nintendo and you desperately want to play it because you know just how much of a scam the modern Pokémon games are nowadays.
Right. The people who like jumped on board to try and like attack Pokemon and disregard Nintendo and pretend they were on the way out. Those people are gone now, right? There is going to be no real recovery for Palworld. And I think like the Pokemon community as a whole really resents that period because I'm kind of shocked. Like it feels like the people who are most like angry about Palworld, the people who talk about it the most, they are Pokemon fans who had to deal with like retards trying to tell them like, actually Pokemon ripped off Dragon Quest, which isn't true at all.
Ooh, talk about irony. Harmon is sitting there calling people criticizing Pokemon retards when the only true retard that I'm seeing here is him for licking Nintendo's boots. Harmon, a real fan, will criticize something that they love precisely because they care about it. For proof of this, look at Pokemon Sword and Shield and a review that a YouTuber named Radical Soda did of it on his channel. The video to which I am referring is called The Deliberately Bastardized Pokemon Game, and he goes over how crappy the modern Pokemon games are, namely Pokemon Sword and Shield. You are absolutely delusional if you think Pokemon is beyond criticism. It's like what a certain group of people out there do whenever they get criticized. They may say, well, those people aren't real whatevers or some bollocks like that. Harmon, people like me who grew up with Pokemon, we love it. But we will be damned if Nintendo is gonna sit there and scam us for our hard-earned paychecks. But rather than reinventing the wheel here, I'll just redirect you to Radical Soda's video review of Pokemon Sword and Shield instead.
Like at all, but you had like complete retards like just pushing that narrative, like that, just that brain dead take to try and like justify Palworld's existence, right?
One thing I will never understand about Nintendrones, especially the Pokemon Nintendrones like Harmon here, is how they bitch about any sort of creature collection RPG, as if in their minds, Nintendo is the only one allowed to make games that have that sort of a tag or an identity. Like, Nintendo should just have a monopoly on the idea of creature collecting. Remember how he was bitching about how people pointed out that Nintendo ripped off Dragon Quest for Pokemon designs? Well, the monsters in Pokemon do look suspiciously similar to the ones in Dragon Quest. Yet I don't hear you making a stink over that. It reminds me of how certain Pokemon fans shit-talk Digimon for being a ripoff of Pokemon, and just like how they're doing with Palworld, they claimed that Digimon was a ripoff of Pokemon, yet Digimon is still going strong today. Oh, and just to piss Harmon off even more, I've enjoyed Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth far more than I have the last 4 Pokemon games that I have played. Your move, Harmon.
It was one of the most embarrassing things I've ever seen. And I still find myself very frustrated with just how many people went along with it. Like, it felt like every major YouTuber, every major VTuber was coming out and like trying to shill for Palworld in those first 2 weeks when it was like the flavor of the week, right? We're past like the whole flavor of the month thing.
Okay, so first it was flavor of the month, now it's flavor of the week. What does that even mean, dude? Does Harmon not realize that every game out there will sell the majority of its sales in the first 2 weeks of its release? And that goes for Nintendo's games too, by the way. Oh, and guess what, Harmon? I could say the exact same thing about Tears of the Kingdom. It was a flavor of the week release. Yeah, Breath of the Wild was a flavor of the month release, but Tears of the Kingdom was a flavor of the week release, as was Super Mario Bros. Wonder. It makes you wonder, no pun intended. Is Harmon projecting here? Because that's what it's sounding like to me. Oh, I just had a deliciously funny thought. I genuinely hope that Palworld gets a physical release, and on the back of the box it'll say, turns so-called real Pokemon fans into a bunch of whiny little bitches that claim Palworld is a ripoff of Pokémon, especially Harmon Smith, a YouTuber that Jestan Diams has torn into over for so many different things now that it's beginning to border on harassment. Seriously, folks, look me in the eye and tell me that you don't think that that selling point is at least a little bit funny. Although, to be honest, it's way too long to be a selling point mentioned on the back of a video game's box. Still pretty funny, though. At least to me it is.
And then they would be completely forgotten. Now it's like 2 weeks. Like we're past like the flavor of the month crap. We're like flavor of the 2 weeks, you know. And Palworld just fell off like immediately.
And so I'll ask it again. Why are you bringing it up here, Harmon? If Palworld has fallen off completely, been completely forgotten about, like you claim, then why exactly are you still bringing Palworld's name up? What's the point? Sounds like you want to kick something that you think, that you claim, is down for daring to question or challenge Nintendo just like a fascist, even though Palworld isn't challenging or competing with Nintendo. Seriously, Harmon, no jokes, no punchlines. You sound like a literal fascist when you make videos like these, or at the very least, an absolute asshole.
And Pocket Pair cannot hope to stay relevant. They cannot hope to stay competitively viable by simply releasing more and more content for a game that isn't maintaining a player base, right?
As I understand it, Palworld averages at least, or around about, 50,000 players daily on Steam alone. Now, I haven't heard any mentions about the Xbox Palworld player base, so if anyone could share that information in the comments section, that would be just great. Oh, but you want to know what can't maintain its player base, Harmon? The Pokémon games. Seriously, folks, look it up if you don't believe me. Notice how every single day now, more and more people are waking up to the scam that Pokémon is. We either have to buy the same game for double the price of other games or trade with strangers if we want to catch them all. Even worse now that we have to trade money to trade Pokémon for people who aren't anywhere near us when Nintendo was letting us do it for free for literal decades. Face the facts, Harmon. You yourself know that Pokémon is a scam, and it's long since past time that you admit it. You want to play Palworld, but you can't because it isn't being sold on your precious Nintendo tablet that was outdated when it was first released to the general public back in 2017.
That isn't monetized, that they don't have a battle pass yet. So, like, I'm very curious as to, like, at what point they're just going to abandon Palworld.
Not anytime soon, I would imagine. I think Pocket Pair is being bankrolled by Microsoft on this venture, but I don't know. If you could let me know in the comments below, that would be great. And if you visited the Palworld Discord server, then I promise you this, you will see that several people are still interested in what is to come for Palworld's future content, myself included. To quote Fratanga Plays, Palworld didn't sell well to spite Pokemon, it's selling well in spite of Pokemon. Nintendo, Game Freak, and the Pokémon Company have gotten way too comfortable with the position that they're sitting in, and it's about time someone stepped up to the plate to challenge them for the throne that they sit on that they most likely take for granted. There's a reason why people are so much more critical of Pokémon, Harmon, and you would know this if you would drop that ridiculous bias of yours. Nintendo has been selling us the exact same game that Game Freak sold last year, but with a slightly different coat of paint. Like, how retarded can you be to sit there and tell me Pokemon is good when you absolutely refuse to put one little toe outside of your little bubble, Harmon, and try another creature collecting RPG? Again, I admire your dedication to your cause, but your cause is seriously stupid. I know I said this earlier in the video, but you are some sort of different dimension of delusional that no one else has ever been in before in any of our lifetimes to think that Palworld is a bad thing, to think that Pokemon innovates, that Pokemon is good. Pokemon is stale. Pokemon is a scam. Pokemon is bad, at least the modern games are, and Pokémon is officially now Nintendo's Dynasty Warriors. It's that simple, and that's why Palworld is such a good thing. And I know that I said that Palworld isn't competing with Pokémon earlier in the video, but if it does, then that's a good thing. Competition is never bad. It's only bad if one side in the competition is cheating, and I promise you this, no one is cheating here except Nintendo through their nostalgia milking, which is the one thing that we can all agree on is something that Nintendo is better at than any other corporation out there. Seriously, if nostalgia milking was a sport, then Nintendo would win the gold medal every single time without fail. The other companies that even thought of trying that wouldn't even stand a chance. But I've gone off on a tangent. Resume, Harmon. We're almost through with your nonsense for one day, thank God.
Right, and I do think this is another issue they're going to have, is that, like, they are never, ever going to repeat, like, Palworld's success, right?
And believe it or not, you might be right, Harmon. But then, as you said in the last video I made on you, Palworld now has clones springing up, and how you couldn't wait to see Pocket Pair and Palworld, and I quote, get what they fucking deserve, and that there would be more bootlegs of it, and then gave no evidence to back up your claims that those Palworld clones were bootlegs, cause Tencent, for those of you who don't know, they're making their own version of Palworld, so clearly Palworld is successful. Also, I like how Harmon just admitted that Palworld was successful, the idiot. You are a complete moron, Harmon. You just basically destroyed everything else that you've been saying throughout this video and the last one, as well as all the other videos you've made bitching about Palworld. But just like DSP is famous for doing, you are quite the revisionist when it comes to rewriting what you've said and done in the past. Oh, just one more clip and we're finally done with this stupid video of Harmon's. Thank God.
The reality was, it was like a flash in the pan thing, and they don't have the resources or the ability or the skill to, like, follow up on that with, like, a new ripoff of another Nintendo property, right? Like, all they can do is just do the same thing they've always done, and that is going to lead them into financial ruin.
Now that absolutely was projection if I've ever heard it, and I promise you this, I've heard projection from several people on the internet, not just from Harmon. He's whining about Palworld doing the same thing, finding another game to rip off like he claims that they've done with Palworld, yet just can't seem to provide evidence to back up that claim. Furthermore, Harmon, what you just said at the end there is basically what Nintendo has been doing with the Pokémon IP for literal decades now. And yet they're doing just fine, but that's due to Pokémon being so ingrained into our culture, sorry for the belch there, that and Pokémon is simply too big to fail at this point. However, now that Palworld has shown us what can be done with the Pokémon Legends Arceus formula, we're genuinely hoping that it makes Nintendo wake up and start making Pokémon games good again. And before anyone gets on here and says, oh, but Game Freak is the company that makes the games, the Pokémon Company and Nintendo just publish them. And you are correct. But Nintendo is selling the Pokémon games on their consoles exclusively, and so as far as I'm concerned, Pokémon is a Nintendo IP and Game Freak is a Nintendo subsidiary. The only thing that I know of left for this video is for me to ask the question that I asked earlier in the video. If Palworld has fallen off and been forgotten like Harmon claims, then why is he still bringing Palworld up? It sounds like he's coping to me, knowing that Palworld will never come to his beloved little Nintendo Switch, and that, folks, makes me absolutely happy, knowing that unless he gets off the Nintendo consoles, he will never get to experience a truly great game that shows us all what a creature-collecting RPG can do. In short, it's his sour grapes mentality. Anyways, that's gonna be it from me for this video, and I cannot believe that I stretched out what was originally a 4-minute video of Harmon's into an almost half an hour video. This was great! Please, Harmon, please keep saying stupid stuff because you make covering your nonsensical BS that much easier to do, and I love it. But for real, folks, find me a new fanboy to cover. I'm getting sick and tired of covering Harmon's nonsense. But, anyways, I'm gonna let you guys and gals all go. Have a great day, and stay safe out there, and bye-bye for now.